exploring how we can master ourselves by looking at how experts say it is possible with your host, Shashati. Welcome to the 5th episode of How to Be with me, Shashati, as your timid presenter, guiding you through life's tricky skills by taking this learning journey with you. Quick disclaimer. As I'm experiencing COVID symptoms, this will be a shorter episode and a friend will fill in the end. This week is going to be particularly tough for many. Even if we were not in a pandemic, loneliness can be a terrible feeling at times, which tends to be heightened during the holiday period, and it's something everyone has to deal with at some point in their lives, being social animals. So how do you gently own and process your loneliness to give it compassion rather than get stuck in it? Juliana from the Folk Told Folk Tales podcast told me about how self-compassion is important to her during the holidays.
To me, self-compassion means being able to understand when you're not at 100% or even 50% or 25%. Just when you're having a bad day or when you're crying or when you're frustrated and you're angry at everyone else, have compassion for yourself. And in that, I think that it'll be easier to have compassion for others. Understand that it's okay when you're not having a good time and when you're not able to do the things that usually make you happy. So as someone who loves doing my podcast, not even as a plug, just as a podcaster, it gets really stressful and people will get upset at you on the internet and people will get upset at you in real life. And just remember that it doesn't really matter if you love what you do. You're not going to love it 100% of the time. So cut yourself some slack and remember that this year is not easy for anyone and you're doing great.
University of Texas Associate Professor of Educational Psychology, Kristen Neff, is the author of Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. Based on empirical psychological research, the book looks at causes and effects of the vicious self-criticism and feelings of inadequacy that plague our minds. Here she is at a 2013 TED Talk, talking about the 3 components of compassion.
The first, you might say, is the most obvious, and that is treating ourselves with kindness versus harsh self-judgment. Treating ourselves like we treat a good friend, with encouragement, understanding, empathy, patience, gentleness. But if you stop to check in with how we treat ourselves, especially on a bad day when things aren't going so well, we are often harsher and more cruel to ourselves in the language we use. We say things to ourselves we would never say to someone we cared about. We say things to ourselves that we probably even wouldn't say to someone we didn't like very much. Okay, we are often our own worst enemy. So with self-compassion, we reverse that pattern and start treating ourselves like we treat our good friends. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. All right, where self-esteem asks, how am I different than others? Self-compassion says, well, how am I the same as others? And one of the ways we are the same as others, what does it mean to be human? To be human means to be imperfect. All of us, everyone in the entire globe, we are imperfect as people and our lives are imperfect. That is the shared human experience. Often what happens, though, irrationally, when we notice something about ourselves, we haven't reached our goal or we're struggling in life, we feel as if something has gone wrong here. This is abnormal. This shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't be, failing to reach my goals. And it's that feeling of abnormality, of separation from others, that is so psychologically damaging. We make it so much worse by feeling we're isolated in our suffering and our imperfection, when in fact that's precisely what connects us to other people. And then the third component of self-compassion is mindfulness. Mindfulness means being with what is in the present moment. And we need to be able to turn toward, acknowledge, validate, and accept the fact that we are suffering in order to give ourselves compassion. Now, actually, oftentimes we aren't aware of our own suffering, especially when that suffering comes from our own harsh self-criticism. We get so lost in the role of self-critic, so identified with the part of ourselves with the back is straight saying, you are wrong, you should have done better, that we don't even notice the incredible pain we're causing ourselves. And if we don't notice what we're doing to ourselves with our harsh self-criticism, we can't give ourselves the compassion we need.
Dr. Neff says, Loneliness stems from the feeling that we don't belong, whether or not we're in the presence of others. If you attend a large party where you don't quite fit in, you're still likely to feel alone. Loneliness comes from feeling disconnected from others, even if they're only inches away. She says practicing self-compassion means you treat yourself the same way that you treat a loved one. Instead of mercilessly criticizing yourself, you listen to your emotions. Apparently, a cross-cultural study found that self-criticism is strongly related to levels of depression and overall life dissatisfaction in the US, Taiwan, and Thailand. So self-compassion provides us with a kinder, healthier, and more helpful alternative to self-criticism. Research indicates that self-compassion can be a powerful way of prompting oxytocin, which can reduce anxiety and counteract symptoms of stress, such as increased levels of cortisol. She recommends mindfulness as a way of distancing yourself between yourself and your suffering. Dr. Neff states that recognizing our shared humanity with other people is another essential element of self-compassion. It can be easy to get so fixated on our misfortune that we can end up becoming lonely, which amplifies any pain you may be feeling. Hence, with shared humanity in mind, we can remember that everyone is in the same boat. She suggests one way of being holistically self-compassionate about all of your strengths and weaknesses is to try writing out a list of 5 ways in which you're above average, 5 ways in which you're just average, and 5 ways in which you're below average. Then step back from your list, view it as a panoramic picture of yourself, and ask, can I accept these aspects of myself? Can I celebrate the fact that I'm human and therefore encompass a wide range of traits, positive, negative, and neutral alike? There's a moment in the film P.S. I Love You with Kathy Bates and Hilary Swank, where she talks about shared suffering after the husband of Swank's character Holly dies.
The thing to remember is, if we're all alone, then we're all together in that too. It helps me sometimes.
Vivek H. Murthy, MD, appointed the 19th Surgeon General by Barack Obama, has written the second book, Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. He talks about the impact of loneliness and the benefits of human connection in his book, even if it means reaching out to help others as a way of learning self-compassion. Here he talks on the Z-Dog MD show about the loneliness epidemic and his own experiences.
When I was in elementary school in particular, I was very close to my mom and dad and still am. I was very close to my sister and still am. I always knew that they were there for me. Their love was unconditional, and I knew that. But outside of that family, I didn't have many friends in school because I was very shy, and it was hard for me to kind of reach out. And I felt lonely. The thing is, I have not to this day told my parents about this because I felt ashamed. I felt that meant that there was something wrong with me. And there are many people who feel like that. And I want people to know that if you are lonely, you are certainly not the only one. There are many people out there who are feeling lonely. And if you aren't feeling lonely, there are likely people around you who are. And this is where I think we all have to think about the role that we could play in addressing loneliness. Because again, it has impacts on our health. It has impacts on our productivity in the workplace. It impacts educational performance in schools. But here's the thing. You don't need a medical degree or a nursing degree to address loneliness. What you need is a willingness to listen. You need a heart full of compassion, the willingness to give and receive love. These are basic human tenets that all of us have. And so this antidote to loneliness actually lies within each of us.
In his book, Dr. Murthy says researchers have identified 3 clear strands. Intimate loneliness is the longing for a partner with whom you share a deep bond. Social loneliness is the need for quality friendships. Finally, collective loneliness is the yearning for a community or network of like-minded people. We need all 3 types of connection to thrive. He states that loneliness is an evolutionary mechanism that tells us something is wrong, as our hunter-gatherer days relied on a pack mentality for survival. Unfortunately, apparently the lonelier we feel, the more we isolate ourselves, and our early ancestors would do this to stop any kind of threat. So one good news is that you're not reacting out of the ordinary. Dr. Murthy writes, it is possible to build free societies that are also rooted in connection if we focus on the right values such as building communities and helping others. He also recommends putting down that phone. Technology can certainly bring us closer together, but it will do so only if we use it with care and consideration. We need the right mix of relationships to lead a happy life, including collective connections as well as an inner circle. I sing in a choir, and I can definitely attest to its benefits. Apparently, it can help raise endorphins because movement and song are evolutionary. His final word is to protect at least a quarter of an hour each day to connect with your loved ones. That's not just those who you live with. Try calling, or better still, video calling your closest friends or family. A small amount of time each day will help you stay connected. So to sum up, treat yourself as you would a loved one. You are not alone in your loneliness. Strive to speak to someone, even virtually, to family, friends, acquaintances, and anyone you can connect with. Right, I'm going to leave you with Sarah Wells, a wonderful life coach who specialises in dealing with a chronic illness while thriving. She helped me during my own transition phase balancing health and life. And remember, help is out there. If you're in the UK, call Samaritans on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. And there's plenty of help available across the globe. You are not alone and you deserve kindness.
Self-compassion gives you the ability to have self-kindness in the face of failure and a realistic mindset where you don't obsess over the negatives. Being a self-compassionate person can enhance your overall life satisfaction and both your psychological and emotional well-being. Who couldn't do with that? Now, the holiday season is typically a tough time for some. And this year, with the COVID pandemic and travel and social mixing restricted, the issue of loneliness has been brought to the fore, as we recognise now more than ever how essential social connection is for us as humans. But loneliness doesn't always happen just because you're alone. It's a feeling and it's very personal, so everyone's experience of loneliness will be different. You can feel lonely in a room full of people just because your need for social interaction is not being met, but you're not necessarily alone. For me, the time in my life when I felt most lonely was when my son was bedbound with ME. Despite having a loving family and friends around me, I felt completely disconnected from the world in which I was living in. Practicing self-compassion can counter some of these feelings of loneliness. It can help to reduce stress, lower anxiety, and helps you cope with stressful life events. It certainly helped me when my son was first sick. There are some things that you can start to do today to improve your self-compassion. And the more you practice, the easier it will become, as new neural pathways are formed in the brain. It's like training a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets. The first is to really acknowledge your feelings and think them through. Meet those feelings with compassion, but don't let them consume you. Try planning something fun to look forward to. Do something positive, no matter how small, to move you away from your negative thoughts. Allow your feelings, but make space for fun too. Make sure you prioritise your self-care. This can range from a simple walk outside in nature to sitting and just being with your favourite hot drink and a book. Whatever works for you. Mindfulness is so helpful to reconnect you with the present moment. You can often feel disconnected because you're in a place of judgment about yourself or others. Practicing mindfulness will help you feel calm and respond with greater awareness and perception. It's really important to stop comparing yourself to others too, because your life is your life. It's your journey, no one else's. Constant comparisons just lead to resentment and will deprive you of joy. Your gifts and talents, successes, contributions and value are entirely unique to you and your purpose in this world, so they can never properly be compared to anybody else. Christmas is always a great time of year to interact with friends and family to improve your relationships. Now, we may be more physically distanced this year, but we can still have social interactions on the telephone, over Skype or Zoom, even by message or text. If that's hard for you, because relationships may be a bit tough, you may need to start with the relationship that you have with yourself, because when that improves, your relationships with others will too. Finally, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of this at some point, you must remember to give yourself the same compassion that you would to a really good friend, including how you talk to yourself. Your relationship with yourself is so important. Always be kind to yourself first.